Hello students. In today's video I am going to discuss the concept of partial derivatives. So students, suppose z is equal to function of x and y. So first of all I would like to discuss when we will be finding partial derivative. If number of independent variables if number of independent variables is more than 1, then we will find partial derivatives. Students, if you see here, if you will observe, z is a dependent variable. And x and y, these are independent variables. So students, since two independent variables are provided here, it means number of independent variables is more than 1. So we will be finding partial derivatives here. And students, if two independent variables are there, then how many partial derivatives will exist? How many partial derivatives will exist? Answer is 2. So first partial derivative will be partial z by partial x, and second will be partial z by partial y. Students, it is partial derivative of z with respect to x, and this is the partial derivative of z with respect to y. But one more condition is will coexist there, and the condition is like when we are finding partial derivative with respect to x, there y will be constant, and when we are finding partial derivative with respect to y, then x will be constant. So I would like to elaborate it little bit more with the help of one example. Suppose z is equal to x square plus y square, and our aim is here to find partial z by partial x and partial z by partial y. So students, partial z by partial x, in this way with respect to x, y will be constant, so its answer will be 2x. And if I want to find here partial z by partial y, so with respect to y, this x will be constant, so answer will be 2y, just differentiation of y square. So students, this is a way to deal with the partial derivative. One more thing, here this partial z by partial x, it is actually first order. It is first order partial derivative of z with respect to x, and this partial z by partial y is also a first order partial derivative. It is a just first order partial derivative of z with respect to y. Students, if z is a function which is depending upon x1 up to xn, so here z is a dependent variable, and x1 up to xn, these are independent variables. So students, since there are more than one independent variables, so that is why we will find here partial derivatives. So my question is like here, how many partial derivatives will exist? Since n independent variables are provided, so n partial derivatives will exist, that is partial z by partial x1, partial z by partial x2, partial z by partial x3, and so on and so forth, partial z by partial xn. Students, thereafter I will talk about the second order partial derivatives. So it is like second order partial derivatives. So how to understand this? If I am writing here partial 2z by partial x2, or if I am writing partial 2z by partial x partial y, or if I am writing partial 2z by partial y2. So all these are second order partial derivatives. So students, how we can evaluate it? If I am writing partial by partial x of partial z by partial x, so then we can obtain this particular value. So students, in order to find this partial 2z by partial x2, first we will be finding partial z by partial x, and then again we will differentiate it partially with respect to x. Students, thereafter it may be written as partial by partial x of partial z by partial y, and it may be written like partial by partial y of partial z by partial y.